Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made this wafer paper wrap that has a geometrical design to it. And I'm also going to show you how to use your silicone lace mats that you have laying around in a different way. We're going to use them on fondant. And that's what I used on this top tier. I'm going to accent with some gold, of course. I personally prefer to do wafer paper on a fondant covered cake. You can do it on buttercream, but if there's a chance that your cake can get some condensation on it, it's a little bit more of a risk. You can coat the wafer paper in cocoa butter to help kind of do a barrier between the wafer paper and the buttercream, but I personally prefer to just not take that chance and just do it with fondant. But if you're doing this for an order and they want buttercream, it can be done. But my tiers are already crumb coated and in the refrigerator and ready to be covered with fondant. I like to do a wrap. If you've watched my channel in the past, you'll know this. I prefer to use a wrap method when I cover my cakes with fondant because it avoids ripping potentially when you wrap it around that top edge, and it also helps it keep it from pulling. And for me personally, it just is so much easier to apply using a wrap. So I have my pieces cut to the size of the cake and set aside to set up for a little bit, maybe about 15 minutes before I put it on the cake. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and use my silicone mat with fondant. I just put some cornstarch on it. You can use powdered sugar. That would work too. I just prefer to use cornstarch to keep your fondant from sticking. And the trick to this is to put a lot of pressure on that fondant and make sure you get a good impression on the fondant. And I like to flip it over and put pressure from both sides. So from the back, and then flip it over and do the front. Just make sure that you get all of the details in there. And I'm removing the outside edges and the ends because there is a definite end spot on this mat where if I were, because I need another piece to wrap around the cake, it would have an awkward place where the two pieces meet because there's going to be like vertical sections that I didn't want. So I just cut those off. And I covered my cake in shortening. I like to use shortening to get the fondant to stick, because you have room for maneuvering it around if you need to. And then I'm just removing the extra off the bottom. This cake is upside down at this point. And that also helps to get a sharp corner on the top. Otherwise, you're having to remove the extra from the top, and it can be a little bit more ragged. This just avoids that. And if your cake is chilled, it's not going to be a problem to flip it upside down. I had let the fondant wrapped tiers set up in the fridge for about an hour. I moved on to something else just because I like that fondant to be a little bit more firm when I am putting decorations on it, so I'm not indenting it. And then I'm just applying these with the shortening as well. You could use water, but see how I had to pull it off and rearrange it? It would be harder to do that with water because they would be stuck together almost immediately. And there was a little gap, so I just gently pressed the two ends together, trying not to ruin the impression. And then I just used a straight edge to level out the top and the bottom. Now, this is where I'm making the geometric wafer paper pieces. I just took 0 grade wafer paper. Right now, I am creating a backing for it. So I need 3 sheets to wrap around the cake, and I cut them to the height of the cake. I measured the cake and removed the extra from the wafer paper because I didn't want that sticking out above the top necessarily. So once I got all 3 pieces cut to size, I'm also cutting pieces. These were about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches in width. And I cut probably, I'm going to say 20 sheets to make this entire wrap. And now I'm taking the pieces that are going to be vertical. I'm finding the middle point. And I'm using a graphite pen. This is not lead, it's a graphite pencil. You're going to remove where you marked your mark, but by cutting it off. But just in case, don't worry, graphite is not toxic. It's lead that is. So I found the middle point, and I'm just using my ruler to create a straight line from the middle up to the top edge. And then I'll do the same from the middle to the bottom edge, or either way, vice versa. But just make sure that you leave at least probably a good 1/4 of an inch, if not a little bit more, on that narrowest point in the middle. Otherwise, you're going to have 2 triangles instead of, what would this angle be? I wanted the middle to taper in. Tapered, that's the word I'm looking for. So you have the optical illusion of it going in at the middle all the way around the cake. And then I cut all of those pieces that I had cut to size for the vertical pieces, using the first one as a template. Now you can cut it with the scissors, but this wafer paper in particular, sometimes you'll get a batch that's drier. I think it's just older, been sitting in the warehouse, and it's kind of drier and more fragile. So I decided for this, using a sharp X-Acto knife kept the edges from being as ragged as it was with these scissors, because I like to cut probably 4 to 5 pieces at the same time. Just pile them up and then cut them at the same time. And now I'm making wafer paper glue. It's just water with your scrap pieces of wafer paper. You submerge those pieces into the water, pop it in the microwave for about 10 seconds, 10 to 30 seconds, and let it cool. And you can use it as a glue. So I just lightly dampened that edge, and I placed the other piece on top. And I'm going to do that for all 3 pieces. I had cut these with about 2 to 3 inches of leeway on the ends, so that I didn't have to worry so much about lining them up exactly and then having it be too short. And you also want to have a little bit of leeway on the ends for when you're wrapping it, when you're transferring it onto the cake. And then I'm just using that same wafer paper glue, just brush lightly on the back edge of the piece, the angled pieces, and just holding them down onto the wafer paper backing just long enough for it to stick on its own. Doesn't take long, seconds, really. It took me about, I'm going to say, an hour to do this whole wrap, approximately. I didn't look at the clock, but if I had to guess, it took about an hour to do this entire piece. And it will warp a little bit. That's just the nature of wafer paper and water. It wants to warp a little bit. But if you add your scrap pieces of wafer paper to the water, it's not going to warp as much. Can you see there how I didn't do it all the way to the end? That was an intentional move on my part. This side, I'm going to bring it further out towards the end, because you're going to have a spot in the back where the 2 pieces meet that there aren't going to be the vertical strips that you're going to have to fill in. And I'm just trying to prevent having to put too many pieces on at that point. And there's the whole wrap all together. Now, you don't have to wait too long to apply it to the cake. I waited just long enough to stack the cakes, and that was really it before I wrapped it around. I just cut all of my straws to the same height. Those are boba tea straws. I just used a little bit of buttercream to get the 2 tiers to stick together. And since this has been chilled, it has the fondant wrap around it, a little bit more stability. The 2 things together, the chilled cake and the fondant, you can just lift it right up. And I do that with buttercream too, because I do put my buttercream cakes in the freezer for about 10 minutes before I stack them. And here I'm just using that same edible glue. A piece, you can see right there, a piece of that wafer paper had broken off because it's brittle. That's okay. We're going to fill it in. And then I had put a little bit of the edible glue on top of it once I had it stuck to the fondant to get the last end, or the other end of the wrap, to stick to it. And then I'm just adding, it's damp enough I didn't have to add any more of the glue to the pieces I stuck in there. Now I'm just adding a trim of gold. You know me, I have to add gold somewhere, right? It just makes it stand out to me. I'm sorry. I am a gold addict. We all know this. And it's just gold luster dust mixed with Everclear. Then I'm adding some edible gold leaf. This is Barnabas Gold. Sorry, I had to think for a second. I don't know why I blanked. I work with Barnabas Gold. I'll try to remember to put a link in the video description, where you can get a discount on the Barnabas Gold. If I don't, comment in the video and remind me. And I'm just attaching those with piping gel, because piping gel won't warp your wafer paper. Then we're just going to put some silk flowers on. You can do fresh. You can make edible flowers. That's fine too. And I personally am just, since this is just a demo cake, I'm just sticking them into the cake. But you could add straws in there for your flowers to stick your stems in. You can add a dollop of buttercream to stick your flowers in. That's fine too. And I wanted this to basically be white on white with touches of gold. And I think I accomplished that. I think this is really pretty. I hope you do too. It's wafer paper. I love to work with it. It's a very good medium. There's so many things you can do. So all my links will be in the description box of where you can get all the products that I used. And hope you got something. I hope you learned something. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And we'll catch you on the next one.